Alright, let's get started with the eyes of the panda. So I've zoomed in a little bit so you can see better. But the eyes actually are rather small compared to the rest of the head when you look at the animal. He has very small eyes and they are placed quite low in the face. So it's very funny. It is quite a large drawing, but still the eyes are very small. Okay, now it is in focus. It was a little bit blurry, the camera. Okay, so first let's start out with just outlining the eyes. I'm going to start with this one, then do the other one. So he has quite dark eyelids, very dark shadow in the inner corner of the eye as well. And I can't see much detail in that, so I'm just going to start with black and do some outlining first. So make sure that the pencil is sharp. And I'm just going to slowly figure out all the different shapes in the eye. I don't need to press hard. First, I just want to make sure that all the shapes are correct. And then I can do the darker coloring. Right, so we have the iris and then the dark shadow above. Below we also have a bit of space between the iris and the eyelid. Okay. Then let's mark the pupil a little bit. It's a very small pupil and a bit of an oval shape. Vertical oval. I'm just drawing that out very lightly. I can always enlarge it if I want to, so I start off quite small. Then I can always make it larger. Okay, so when I'm happy with the shape of the eye, I'm going to color in all the very dark areas. So after one layer of black, you'll probably still see the paper texture. So then we can just go over one more time. okay. And of course we have the eyelid above. It's also quite dark right here in the corner, but it's not black, so I don't want to add too much black. Alright, so let's do the eyelids for a little bit before we move on to the rest. So I see some purple, some Caput Mortem Violet, 263. I see this on the eyelid, so I'm just going to put down a light base layer of that on the eyelid. And we can add light colors on top of dark colors, so I can add the highlights on top of this later. And I just work with light pressure. I try to not fight the paper. Little bit of this on the bottom eyelid as well. I think we also need dark indigo. Let's get that color. So here I have dark indigo, 157. And I'm also going to add that on top. So here on the edge of the eyelid we have a highlight. I'm adding a little bit of dark indigo on there, but not too much. So I can do my highlighting color on top of that. I'm just taking it slowly. In the first layers, you will still be able to see the paper texture through. And we're going to be building this up, so eventually we'll lose that texture, but in the first layers you will still see it. So try to keep working with light pressure. Doesn't matter if you can still see the texture. Now I feel I need a little bit more black even to sharpen my lines, darken up the shadows even more, to adjust the shape of the eye here and there. Okay, let's add some highlighting colors on the eyelid. So now I'm getting sky blue, 146, which is a really nice color for highlighting black areas. So I'm going to get this one. Make sure it's really sharp because we're going to do very small highlights now. And then let's put that on the very edge. A tad in the inner corner of the eye as well. And then above. Okay, to brighten that up even more, I'm going to add a little bit of white, but not too much, just to make the eyelid pop out even more. Just using the white Polychromos 101. Especially the corner here is quite white, so adding a bit of that. Right, so very small little details. Some more detail in the top eyelid. So this is some burnt umber 280 brown tone. And then after filling in the eye, we can slowly transition into the fur. And then this eyelid will make more sense. Right now it just looks a little bit weird, but it will make sense when we start doing the fur. Actually, I can keep using this brown for the iris area. But first I want to map out the highlights at the top. Cleaning up the line of the eye. This has to be a very sharp line. Okay, so I'm getting the sky blue again, 146. And with this I'm going to carefully map out the shape of the highlights. So with very little pressure, because I don't want to make it too dark or too heavy. Back to the brown. I'm going to work around the shape of the highlight now. So this is the burnt umber again. And I'm going to put down a very light base layer of this. So not too much, just a light layer. So we have still enough room left, space on the paper to do more colors. You can see a highlight on the very left edge of the iris. Going to skip that, work around it. So this is a very small eye, so it's quite tricky to do. And then we have an area right here. That's darker, so I can fill this in a bit darker. Some dark line through the highlight. You can see that in the photo. Which is probably reflecting like the trees and the environment. So you can see some shapes in the highlights, some lines. Let's darken up the pupils straight away because the highlight is not really going through the pupils, so we can darken it up now with black so we don't lose it. Alright, so let's start adding some more color. I see a little bit of a red tone here and there. Not really red, more like an orangey red. So I'm going to use Sanguine 188. I'm going to add that on top of the brown with light pressure in circular motions. Also in the more lighter parts of the iris. Okay, so at this stage we don't want the paper to be saturated yet, so I'm working with very light pressure. I want to add a tad of yellow orange or ochre. So this is burnt ochre 187, which I want to add around the pupil. There you can see like the lightest tones. So adding a bit of that. Don't worry if it looks too dark right now, because we can do the highlights with another lighter color on top. I'm going to add a little bit of Caput Mortuum Violet in the dark parts, just for some more depth in the color. So a little bit on the edge of the iris to create a more smoother transition between the black and the iris. We just have to keep building and building. Okay, I think now we can start doing some of the highlights. So you can see a highlight or a lighter patch just on the left of the iris, on the edge. And it looks a bit pink, so I'm going to add that with cinnamon. Maybe cinnamon is too dark. Maybe I need to go in with beige red instead. I think I have to get beige red. Yep, I'm going to get beige red. So this is 132. Slightly lighter than the cinnamon, and I'm going to add this on the very edge of the iris, that rounded shape, so you create that round shape of the iris. And do I see this anywhere else? Maybe a little bit around the pupil, just create some texture there, maybe right here as well. So we don't have a lot of space for a lot of detail because it's so small. So I think we're already there with that iris. But we do have to do the big highlights. So now I'm going to get black or a white and lighten it up. Put some more shape in there as well. Back to Caput Mortem Violet. So we'll hype up some of the darker detail, like the lines that I see through the highlight. Going to darken up around the edge a little bit to hype up the contrast between the highlights and the rest. That's quite important. It's very finicky work. A little bit of dark indigo in the darker parts of the eye. Alright, so we are quite there with this eye, and I can always come back to it, but we're not going to be looking at this drawing from up close, so I have to look at it from a distance and see what it looks like that way. I think just want to smooth out this transition between the iris and the black, so I want to add a bit of dark indigo just on the edge. Moving it inwards a little bit more. Alright, so that's it for the first eye. Let's keep it this way. Let's move on to the other one. So we don't see a whole lot of the other one. I need to get a piece of paper for my hand so I don't smudge anything. So I get my black again, sharpen it, and then do the outlining again. So I'm not going to be outlining the very left edge of the eye because we see that the iris, it sticks out a little and it is highlighted, and I actually don't see a black outlining around the whole eye. It's just the eyelids. So do the inner corner of the eye, And then underneath here. Okay, so that's all the dark parts sketched out and filled in. Let's do the pupil as well. Lightly. Alright, so let's sketch out that highlight again. I'm going to be, or no, let's first do the eyelid. So we don't see a whole lot of the bottom eyelid. I'm just going to fill in the highlight part lightly with dark indigo first. We don't see a lot of the top eyelid either. Doing a little bit of dark indigo right there as well. Okay, and then I'm getting the sky blue again. Highlights the edge of the eyelids. And then a white, little bit right there. And then right away I'm going to be putting in that highlight on the edge of the iris, because I want that one to be very bright. Let's do those smaller ones at the top as well. Okay, let's take the burnt umber brown again, 280, and do the base layer on the iris, focusing on the darkest parts. So next to that highlight, we have dark edge. It's very tedious, very small. With pastels it would have been even harder, because with pastels it's harder to do this detailed piece of work. With polychromos it's alright, but it's still very small. Let's do some sanguine again. So that's the 188. And go over that brown, create that orangey tone in the eye. Small circular motions. See, that brings a lot of depth and color in the eye. Let's do a tad of that burnt ochre as well. So that's the 187. So I'm really looking at where the lights, where the darks in the pupil are, or the iris. So we see this very clear, bright area on the right of the pupil. That's where I add this color. And now I can darken things up a little bit more with the Caput Mortuum violet. So I'm looking at the dark parts now. Darken up. And now I can darken up the pupil as well. And doing some highlighting again with the beige red 132, but mainly this part. So this lighter section, just dotting a little bit. Again, try to not fight the paper, but work with it. And maybe I can even use some lighter yellow to put a bit more brightness in the eye. So this is yellow ochre, light yellow ochre, 183. So put a bit more of that yellow in. Maybe also in the other eye. Brighten that up. Yep, I like that. This is dark Naples ochre, 184. Yep, alright. I think I'm going to leave that. Alright, so those are the eyes. Let's zoom out. They look nice from a distance. Yep, so I'm going to keep those in this way. Now we can continue with the fur. Okay, so for the fur, you can see that above the eye we have a white patch of fur and above this eye as well. And then here on the forehead and the rest of the forehead, we can see lots of orange and red in the fur. And then on top of that we have all those white hairs. So that's pretty tricky to draw. But I'm just going to start around the eyes and then work my way towards the forehead and the ears right here. So let's do that. Pick some colors first. So around the eye we can see some very dark orange fur. So for the dark orange fur, also for this area right here, we have to pick a few different colors to get enough depth in there. Definitely going to use burnt ochre, 187. So these are the colored pencils, by the way. So from now on, we'll be working with colored pencils, just like we've done with the eye. Here I have sanguine, 188. Also a nice orange color to darken up those and put in some shadows. I like Caput Mortem Violet, 263. And probably we'll also need some brown. So for that, I'll get the burnt umber, 280. Warm toned brown, which works nicely with the warm tones of the burnt ochre and the sanguine. Then maybe I also need like some red, some dark red. Let's see what I can find. Maybe this one would be nice too. This isn't really a red, but it's more like a mix between brown and purple and a tiny bit of red. This is Caput Mortem, 169. So very similar to the Caput Mortem Violet, but a little bit more red, which would also be nice to darken up the red fur. So let's start with these colors. And then of course for the white fur, we'll be adding like white, of course, but also gray, cool gray 1. And then I'll also be adding some pink for some more depth in the white fur. So that's beige red, 132. So this is about the base of the colors that we'll be working with, and then I'll probably also do some glazing afterwards, especially on the light fur to put some more color in. But this is a nice base for the fur itself without the glazing. All right, so let's just get started with these very small orange circles around the eye. And of course we can work from dark to light a little bit. So I'll be starting off with sanguine, 188, which isn't the darkest color, but it isn't the lightest color either. So I'm starting off medium basically. So sharpening that. And then I'm just going to lightly start out by adding some of the sanguine around the eye. Mix it in with the eyelid as well, so this all blends together a little bit more. Underneath as well. follow that fur direction. So I'm going around the eye, following that shape. Feel like I can add a bit more dark, so I'm going to add the Caput Mortem Violet to 63. Especially darken up here on the inside. Just drawing small lines, but I'm not really focusing yet on drawing the fur. Going to make this one nice and colorful. Nice and colorful drawing. And let's just continue right away with the white patch on top. So after that we might do some fur texture here, but it's so small of an area that it doesn't really need any fur texture. So for the white, I'm going to go for a layer of cool gray number 1. So I want this section above the eye to be very light. So I'm starting off very light, but not with white. That way I still have some room left to do white details if I want to. But I am going to go very lightly. Put down a base layer of this. And I'm only filling in that patch that you see, the shape of that patch. So we have a blob right here. Following the shape of the forehead a little bit as well. And then it also goes around the eye bit. Underneath the eye. And this will need many layers, so don't push. Doesn't matter if you can still see the paper through. And of course this whole area on the nose is also very light, but we'll get to that later. Let's focus on this part first. Of course we also have to make sure that we don't see the graphite lines anymore. So I have some graphite lines right here. I'm going to lighten those up. Alright, let's do the other eye first. So let's get started with sanguine again. So 188. A little bit of around the eye and above. Feel like I need some brown here to darken it up. So this is the burnt umber. 280. Darkening up above the eye. You can also see that he has some lashes sticking out. Right, so we don't see much of that orange fur on this eye. Maybe I need to darken up this eye a little bit. Okay, so we're starting off very loosely. Back to the cool gray one. That's 230, by the way. Light layer of that, and also follow that shape and follow the direction of the fur. So the fur goes like this. On this side it goes like that way, and it goes like that way to the top, and then here it goes like the other way. And of course we don't see a lot of this side, so the fur seems to curl over a bit quicker. So it basically goes sideways here. Making sure to remove graphite lines. Can't wait to get to this area. This is a very fun area to draw. Let's just finish the forehead first. Okay. Making sure that these shapes are about correct. And now let's do a base layer here in between the eyes and taking it further to the top of the head. So for this fur, it's tricky fur because you can see many different colors in it, but the undertone is red with a little bit of pink to it. So what I want to do is put down a very light base layer of red or orange. And I think for this base layer, maybe Venetian red would be even better than sanguine. So this is Venetian red, a little different from sanguine, 190. This has more of a red tone to it. But for here, I'm going for sanguine. This is very new fur to me, so I really need to think as well. See what the best strategy is. Yep, I'm going for sanguine. So if I would start with this is the burnt ochre. This is really yellow. So this is probably too yellow to do for a base layer because the fur would look really yellow then. So sanguine is better, but I'm going to put it in super lightly. So almost no pressure. This creates a really light base, and then we can go in right away with the light hairs and draw those in. And after that, I can go and darken up in between again. Looking at the fur direction, I'm trying to mix in my sanguine a little bit with these patches that I just drew so that the edge doesn't become too harsh. making sure that the layering is even. So I keep the layering even all through this part. So this area right here is a little bit darker, so I can go over one more time to darken this up slightly, but I'm not adding more pressure in the darker areas. I just go over one more time, make it darker that way. So here we have another darker part. Not really focusing on any hair texture right now. I just want an even layering, though I am working in the right direction. Holding the pencil quite close to the end. That way you get a lighter pressure on the pencil automatically. I also see that orange right here. This way we can map out all the markings as well. Okay, so take it super easy. Let's take this color across. Let's just fill in a large area at first. So we have a base layer on the whole forehead, then we can start with the layering. You can see that here at the top of the forehead, the fur gets very orange. So here where the fur becomes very orange with little, very little white hairs, I can hype up the pressure a little bit. Soften up this edge a little bit so it becomes easier to draw that soft fur on top. So we want soft edges on those ears. Okay, continue. Not going to be drawing all these hairs overlapping the background just yet. Focusing first on the initial shape of the face. Right, so just going to take this across. Very light base layer on the area where all the white is here, and a little darker right here. I'm basically going to do the whole face area, skipping the ears for now. Putting down small lines. I do try to keep an eye on the length of the hairs. So for my base layer, not really focusing on fur, but I am trying to do the lines in the same length as the fur length. So it helps a little bit with the fur texture later. And then here on the cheek area, the fur gets really dark. Then we have that leaf crossing as well. And here we have another white patch. Let's fill in that white patch as well. So going back to cool gray 1, 230. And fill this area in. Let's take this sanguine down right away. We have a stripey mark. All the way to the mouth area. We'll get to this part later. So let's start with this, making sure that my forehead has a light base layer. I'm going to do a little bit more sanguine right here, blend it in a little bit with gray. to go carefully around that leaf because we want the shape of it to be very sharp, very straight. Right, and this area will all be very dark. I'm just filling it in with sanguine for now. So this first layer takes a while to do. It's very important to get a good idea of the markings on the face, mapping them out, making sure that they are all in the right place. And then we can start building from there. Okay, let's get started right away with some darker coloring on the areas that are really dark, like here. The stripe's quite dark. And here on the forehead, I can darken up here and there. So I can get started right away with that. And I actually see that brownish, purplish tone as well. So I might add some Captain Morrison, 169. Going to work a little bit on the fur texture. So I'm going to draw lines. Already focusing a bit on drawing the shadows in between the lighter hairs. So because we're working with colored pencil, we have to keep building up carefully, as we can't go with light on top of quite thick layers, dark layers. Like we can with pastels. With pastels, I would start off with a very dark base layer. But with colored pencil, we have to start medium. So I can just draw some darker hairs, still with light pressure. This is going to start the fur texture, keeping space open in between my lines. The fur here is quite short, so here I keep my line short. And then as we get to this area, the fur gets longer. So there I can lengthen my lines, making sure that there is some variation in them, curving them a little bit, so you get a more natural look to the hair. Going into the gray also, so we can create a nice transition from the gray into the dark fur. You can see that it gives a lot of depth to the fur already without actually thickening the layer that much. really like this color. Don't use it a lot, but it's a really nice color. Right, so here we have an area that looks very much like this color. Here, right next to the ear. So I'm going to fill that in. Can go a bit thicker this time. Not really worrying yet about all these hairs sticking out at the top. We'll get to that later. Okay, so let's start building up a little bit more color. I want to put in a bit of the, what's it called? The burnt ochre, 187. Not too much, but only in the places where I see yellow. See a tiny bit of yellow right here. Not really yellow, more like ochre. Using this as a glazing tone again. Right there on the forehead, also over here, see some hairs with ochre. Okay. Working with colored pencil this way feels more like painting. Just building it up slowly. Then to compensate for the yellow, to contrast it a little bit, I want to also add some Venetian red, 190. Also to darken up here and there. I'm going to add this more in the areas where I see more a pink tone to the fur. So it takes a while to learn how to see all those colors. Just takes a lot of practice. The most important thing with fur like this, like yellow or orange toned fur, is to not only add oranges and yellows, because that's going to look very unnatural, sometimes cartoonish even. So even with orange fur and yellow fur, we want pinks in there, purples, maybe even some blue. This way we'll give it a lot of life. So now the whole forehead is starting to get a nice base layer. Still very light. So this way we can still draw our white hairs on top. I think I'm going to put down a super light base layer of Venetian red here on the edge, because I see a light pink tone in it. Trying to not touch the paper. Alright, so let's also add some depth in the white patches. So I do see a little bit of blue in there. I also want to go in with a darker gray. Let's do cool gray number 2. 231 that is. Mainly for this area right here, which is a little more in shadow. Maybe I need an even darker gray as well. Maybe I need to pick cool gray 3. So that's 232. Yeah, that's better. So this shadow area can be a little darker in the base tone. And I can just add that on top of the cool gray one. add it right here above the eyes and next to the eyes. And also add some other colors. I see some blue and I see some pink in the whites. So for the pink I use beige red 132 and the blue is sky blue 146, which I really like. Use it as a glaze a little bit. Not too much. Let's go in with the pink. Pink is a warmer tone again, which works well with the rest of the fur. So the blue doesn't really fit well with the fur because the rest of the fur is quite warm toned. So let's compensate that a little bit with the pink. Okay, so now I feel it's time to get started right away with the white. So because we have some layers underneath, the white won't show up like extremely white. And if the hairs are too light, we can always tone them down by going over them with some pink or some blue. So I'm just going to get started with white right away. Make sure it's very sharp. And then I can just draw all those white hairs that we see on top of the red fur. Okay, so let's get started. Let's see how well this works. So we see quite a bit of white here in the very center of the face, so I'm adding that. With pastels, I wouldn't get started with white because they are more opaque. But with colored pencil, glazing is very easy. So we can always tone the whites a little bit afterwards. We see lots of white here on the forehead. So now I'm really making sure that I'm going in the right direction. Hairs are going upwards and then towards the left, a tiny little bit. Some of the hairs are clumped together a little bit. So I'm trying to make this as natural looking as possible. So some hairs are crossing, some are clumped together. leaving open a tiny bit of space in between the hairs so that you can still see the red showing through. And even on the white patches, we can now fill in that white as well and make the white stand out because we started off slightly darker. I'm basically going to be working all around the face. Not pushing hard. Want the hairs to be thin, natural looking. Especially in this area, you can see them crossing. So I'm trying to make them cross, make them a little bit like twiggly. Don't know if that's a word. I'm trying to twist my pencil. And automatically you will create very small spaces in between each hair, which we can later darken up. And now the pencil is getting too dull, so I need to sharpen. So you notice right away when you can get those very fine lines in anymore, so then you have to sharpen right away. Need to go around the ear a little bit right here. The ear's very white, as you can see. So I'll probably just fill that in white. Alright, so I think I'll just start with this. So I have all the most important white spots in there. Now I can start darkening up to create more depth in the fur, because right now there's not enough contrast in. So we need to increase the contrast. And I think I'm going to start with some brown. So the burnt umber 280 for the very darkest shadows. Might have to combine it with the Caput Mortem violet to make the brown fit in. Like right here. You see some very dark lines. basically going in between the white now. Still not pressing very much. Just looking at the darkest spots now. But I think for the brown this is already enough. I'm going to switch to Caput Mortem Violet. Also going over the brown to create some depth in it. This way I can bring the colors together a little bit more. So getting this fur to look very realistic is quite tricky. It takes many layers. But we're getting there. The muscle area will be a little bit easier. Okay, so now I feel that the saturation of the fur can be a little higher. So I want to put back in some of that orange. Going back to sanguine, the one we started with. Make sure it's nice and sharp. As much as possible, I'm going in between the white hairs. Now I'm going to add some more pressure to get that saturation up. And trying to already get rid of some of the paper texture. Especially this top part of the forehead can be more saturated. Alright, and this part of the face, the side of the face, will be darkened up lots more later. But let's just increase the amount of sanguine here as well. I have to go very carefully around that leaf. Okay, so now I feel that I've lost a little bit of the yellow. So now I can go back in with the burnt ochre and add some more of this. This way we create that deep orangey yellow fur. increasing the pressure slightly. And now I feel that I need more dark again. So I'm going back to Caput Mortem. That's the 169. And go into the darks more carefully. Trying to really separate the hairs now, so I'm not just randomly placing my Caput Mortem everywhere, but I'm trying to look at the hairs, what I've already created with the white, and go in between them, separate them to really make them pop. feel like this area needs more color, more glazing. And I can see a tiny bit of magenta in there, so I do want to do some magenta glazing. Light magenta, 119. Glaze that on top. Also on top of the white. Just on this side of the face. Quite like that. Maybe also some violet. I basically use violet in every single colored pencil drawing. 138. Also really nice glazing color. Especially on white fur. I'm going to glaze it a little bit over everything. Very lightly. So we're not there yet. Keep your patience with it. I think we need a second layer of white hairs to hype up the ones that we already put down. And I also want to fill in this side of the face. I think I'm going to do that with gray first. Let's do that. So cool gray 1. Let's just put down a base layer first, and then afterwards we're going to be drawing the overlapping hairs with the background. This is basically all going to be white, so let's just skip that, the ear. Feel that I made this face a little bit too fat on the side, so I'm going next to them with the greens that I already used. Let's make the face a little less fat looking. And of course you can decide if yours looks fine or if you want to change something to the face, the shape of it. Okay, I feel that's better. Okay, I want to put in a little bit more burnt ochre. And then I'm going to go in again with white, hype up some of the white hairs. I do want to increase the saturation of the orange hair. A little bit more sanguine as well. Okay, so back to white, and I'm going to hype up the white hairs again. Make sure that the white is nice and sharp. And then again, going over some of the white hairs that I already drew, and I'm also going to add some new ones. Now we can really get that nice fluffy fur texture in. Alright, so make sure that the hairs are crossing, clumping together. There has to be enough variation in there. Okay, and let's also fill in that edge of the face now. So I need to be careful because I don't want to smudge anything. So I'm going to place my piece of paper on the drawing, trying to not smudge and move around my paper too much. And then I'm going to carefully draw in, whoops, those overlapping hairs on top of the background. And also here we want a variation in the tips of the hairs. So one is going upwards a little bit. The next might be going like downwards or overlapping. So we want nice natural look to the hairs. I'm trying to keep my movements quick. And this needs to be sharpened. It's already too dull to do enough detail. So you can see that this goes really well. As long as the pastel underneath isn't too thick, this goes really well. Right, and then I can go in between with my green, the 585, and help with the edge a little bit. Go into the hairs, make it less generic and more natural. Okay, so I want a little bit more color in the edge. So I'm going to add some cinnamon, 189. I'm going to glaze that a little bit so that this isn't all super white. It has some color in it, so especially right here at the top, a little bit of cinnamon. And then I also want to do a little bit more dark detail as well in the dark areas of the fur, like right here. Venetian red. think I need more Caput Morton violets. Okay, so we're getting there with the face. We're not there yet. I think I will leave the ears for next part, because just the face itself is already long enough of a part. So leaving the ears for part 3, but I will do the muzzle area in this part. So let's move on to that. Let's leave the face for what it is, or the forehead area. And then we can always come back to it later. Here and there the paper needs to be saturated still. I see some texture through. So we'll definitely need to do some more layering here. I'm just adding a bit more of the burnt ochre. Okay, let's move on to the nose. So the nose has quite the same shape as a dog. A little bit different though. The nostrils are smaller. You can't see the nostrils that well on the photo, but I've edited the photo a little bit. Made it lighter so I could see more detail. So you can also edit the photo a little bit, make it lighter, hype up the brightness, and then you can actually see the shape of the nostril in there. So let's get going. First, I'm just going to outline the nose a little bit. So I'm going to take black, especially the bottom line right here is very dark. And then the top area, the top half is lighter. So I'm not going to outline that black, but I am going to outline the nostrils. Look very closely. Here we got that center line. And then just like with the dog, that nostril area, it continues all the way to the side of the nose. So this is all a hole. Let's fill that in. Okay, so that's the bottom half. And then for the top half, I'm going to outline a little bit with dark indigo 157 because I see lots of blue in the top half. And then the top line is more of a smooth transition into the skin and the fur. So I'm just lightly blocking this in. And actually, this whole top half of the nose can have a base layer of dark indigo. Filling this in with light pressure, small circular motions. And then the bottom is so dark that we can fill this in with the base layer of black. And I'm also darkening up around the nostrils, so eventually you're not really seeing the shape of the nostril anymore. I don't want to make it as dark as on the photo, but I do want a nice contrast in the nose to get that wet effect in there. going over with dark indigo to get rid of the paper texture. And also a little bit of Captain Morton violet on the bottom half as well. Actually, let's also add a little bit on the top half. Following that shape, so it goes like this way. This is the shape of the nose. And then the bottom half, it goes down like this. So I'm following that shape with the direction of my strokes. Then I want to do some glazing of color on the top half of the nose. I'm doing some violet. Still light pressure, as we do have to put in our highlights. Okay, so now we can add the little circles, the little dots on the nose with sky blue. Add some texture on the nose. I'm just filling in little dots next to each other. Trying to not push too much because this is not the lightest color yet. So we need to add some white on top of this. And now I can go in between those dots with black to create the texture. Alright, I'm going over again with a bit of the dark indigo, just to get rid of the paper texture. And now I'm going to get white and add some highlights. Going to highlight some of these dots. So I'm looking at the photo to see where the most light hits. Have to put quite some pressure in to make sure that the white stands out. Alright, so that's basically already it for the nose. And then of course when we do the white around, or the gray and the white, the nose will really pop out. So let's do that right away. Let's fill in a base layer for the bridge of the nose and the top lip. I think I'm going to stick with the cool grays because I like the look of them. So I'm going to start with cool gray 3 because here, close to the eyes, we have a shadow area. So here the fur isn't actually that white. So I'm starting with cool gray 3. So that's 232. Right, so here we have the darkest areas in the fur. The side, a little bit underneath the nose, and right here, right there, in the inner corners of the eye. maybe a little bit on the lip. Then let's move on to Cool Gray 2. To put down a base layer on the rest of the muzzle. Alright, so I'm leaving open the very brightest areas, like the bridge of the nose and the edge of the muzzle right here. And I'm going to put down a base layer of Cool Gray 1 there. So here on the bridge of the nose. The fur here is very short, keeping my strokes short. Alright, so now before I'm going to do the detailing, I want to do more color, more glazing on the muzzle first. So let's do some pink, some cinnamon especially. So that's the 189. Right here I see some cinnamon. Just going to lightly, almost no pressure, glaze that in. This way I can also connect the rest of the fur to the muzzle a little more, make everything go together. And then I also want to glaze some sky blue and some violet. Sky blue mainly on the sides. Not really worrying about the fur transition yet, right there. Just want to get the right colors in. And then violet. And then I want to do some of the darker detail with dark indigo. So here, for instance, from the nose into the fur, you can see some darkness in between the hairs. So that I'm going to put in with dark indigo. I want to add a little bit of Caput Mortem Violet in the shadows to make sure that everything is not too blue. So the Caput Mortem Violet, it contrasts the blue really nicely. Make it look more of a brown. Okay, so now we have a good base for the white. Need to darken up this patch as well. Alright, so now we can do the white. So now we can really hype up all the areas that are super white, like the edge of the muzzle right here. Going to really lighten up that edge. Then the fur of the muzzle, it goes towards the eye. And then here we have that change of direction again. And you have that with dogs as well. pressing a bit harder where the fur is really white, like right here. Here at the bottom, the fur is a bit darker, so I'm not pressing too hard here. Of course, we also want the whiskers to stand out afterwards. Right, I need more layering in this area, more color. I need a bit more of the warmer colors. I feel like I need more light magenta. Little more violets. Tiny bit of black. And back in with white. Nice and sharp, so I can go over a little more opaque. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit more shading on the white fur with a bit more gray. Cool gray 3. And then I'm going to continue with the mouth area. I want this area right here to be dark enough so that the whiskers will stand out on top. But we have to make sure that the pressure is super light. Otherwise that white won't go on top anymore. Alright, so let's move on to the mouth. So you can see that he sticks his tongue out, which is really cute. So we're going to draw the tongue in as well. And also we can see some of the lips. For a base layer on the lips, I'm going to use a gray. Let's go for a warm gray tone, maybe Payne's gray. Though Payne's gray is not warm, it's cool. But I think that will work fine as a base, so that's 181. And I'm going to go around the tongue for now. And I'm going to start off with a light layer of this, because if we get started with the black right away, those white hairs overlapping will not go on top that well anymore. So I'm just going to go in with a super light layer of Payne's gray. Also going around this little leaf that sticks out as well. And then the dark area will fade into this area next to the face. But for now we're keeping it very light. Creating a little bit of shadow at the top of the tongue with the same Payne's gray color. As we've got a shadow on the tongue cast by the top lip. So we can use the same color to put that shadow in already. Making sure to keep an eye on the lips to make sure that they are the right shape. And then basically this darkness will connect to this stripy area. and it will continue downwards towards this area. That's quite tricky. We'll save that for part 3. Okay, so let's put in the tongue right away. So for the tongue, I can use a base of the same colors that we've already used in the fur. So I see a tiny bit of red. I do need a brighter red for that, so let's pick something. Probably this one, Pale Geranium Lake, so we'll add that. That's 121. And then I also see some violet, so we'll add that to the tongue, especially in the center. And then for the dark shadow areas, we can use the Caput Mortuum violet. And then probably we can do some highlighting with beige red. Maybe we can add some light magenta as well, so we have a nice variation of colors. Let's get started with the color that is the most prominent. So I think that will be violet, the 138. I see that mainly on the center, so I'm putting that right there with small circular motions. Moving on to that red tone, Pale Geranium Lake. I hope I say that right. Or it's geranium, I don't know. Seeing that mainly on the side. It does look weird right now because the contrast is very low. We still have to darken up the gums. But we'll get to that. Let's move on to some shadow with Caput Mortuum Violet. And add that especially at the top, center, to create that indent in the tongue. Also adding it on the side of the tongue to create some more depth. And I'd rather add multiple layers of light pressure. You have way more control that way, so trying to keep the pressure light all the way through. And then we are already almost done, basically. So I'm going to add a little bit of light magenta 119. Hype up the brightness a little bit and the saturation of the tone, mainly in this part where the light hits. Basically use it as a blending tone a little bit. And then I can do a tiny bit of highlighting with beige red 132. Just a little bit because there's not much light in this area. And then I can also hype up the contrast in the dark area. Let's use dark indigo for that, to create lots of depth in the color. Tiny bit more of that red tone, the pale geranium lake. So I feel like I can't press too hard here because we still have to draw all those white hairs on top. But let's do the chin first. So I'm going to do some base layers on the chin. And now I feel I have to switch to the warm grays because this area looks very warm, very orangey. For that, I feel it's better to get started with the warm grays. So I'm going to be using, maybe this one's too dark. Definitely going to be using warm gray 3 to 72. Maybe one lighter one as well. Warm gray 2, that's 271. This one looks even more warm than this one. I think this one is better to start with. Light layer around that lip. And next to the leaf. Making sure that all graphite lines are gone. Going in with, for the edge, I do have to use a cool gray because, whoops. As always, I'm dropping my pencils everywhere. So for the edge right here, it does look quite light. So I'm going to use cool gray 1 to 30, fill in this edge, which we're also going to be making like very hairy. But in order to do that, we have to fill in this area first. And that I'm going to do in part 3. Let's just fill in the basic shape of the chin. Okay, so that's that light edge. Let's continue with the warm gray 2 to 71. So that's the warm gray again. Do the rest. So the areas that I haven't filled in yet. Let's go in with the warm gray, what's this? Warm gray 4 to 73. Add some of the shadows. So right here, below the tongue, on the chin, we have a darker shadow going down. And also the leaf is casting a shadow, so we have a shadow right here. Just taking it slowly. Don't worry if it looks weird. Making sure that there are no harsh edges on these shadows, so make sure to soften my lines. Alright, so now let's work on these lips and the gums a little bit more. I'm going to take the Payne's Gray 181 up slightly. Looking at that shape that I see in the lip, so I'm trying to ignore all the hairs overlapping. Looking at the generic shape of the mouth area first. That has to be correct, so we have that like that shape going down and then up a little bit. And then I can finish the base layer. We have a strip of paper that I haven't filled in yet, so I'm going to take, let's do a warm gray again. Let's do the warm gray 3, 272. Just fill this in a little. Maybe even some warm gray 4. Alright, so basically we want the very bottom edge of the top lip to be a little darker. Soften that line. Alright, so now I can go in with white and start filling in all the lightest hairs overlapping the gums. Then after that, we can darken up with black. But when you go in with black first, it will just be too dark for the white to show up. Alright, so quick motions. Make sure to vary in the direction. So some of these hairs are going forward, some are going back a little more, varying in the length of them as well. Let's ignore this area with the leaf. Going to save all the greens for part 3. Okay, so I just want to get all the most important hairs in there. The ones that have to stand out the most. We can do the slightly darker ones, the thinner ones on top of the black, but some have to be thick. Alright, so now I'm going to take black. Or maybe let's do dark indigo first for some depth in the color. Maybe black right away is too flat. So let's do 157 first, dark indigo. Now I can go in between the white hairs and darken up the gums. keeping an eye on the shape of the gums, making sure to not lose that shape. Also darkening up at the top of the leaf because it's very dark where he starts. But I'm still using light pressure because this is just a base layer for more depth in the color. So I don't need to make it really thick of a layer. And then here it will get really dark. Okay, so now I'm going in with black. Make sure the pencil's very sharp. We're also going to be putting in a little bit more pressure now. And I'm going right beside the tongue, making sure that the shape of the tongue is very nice and sharp. I'm going carefully in between those hairs. Alright, so I'm really taking my time to look at the shapes. We also need to finish this area a little bit. Alright, so that's it for the black for now. I'm going to do some more shading with dark indigo. Go on the gums, on the black, and then taking it down a little more so we can create a base for the white hairs on the chin. And I'm also going to darken up some of the hairs on the top lip. To create a bit more shading on that lip so it looks more round. The brightest white hairs I'm going to work around to keep those bright. Alright, so that's lots better. Let's do some shading with a little bit of color. So I'm going to do a bit of blue or sky blue 146 on the chin. Not too much. Then I also feel like a little bit of light magenta 119. And then I also see some brownish hairs as well. So I'm going to add those with Venetian. No, let's do the Caput Mortem 169. I always forget that I have that. And add some of the dark chin hairs at the bottom. Small hairs. Tiny bit of sanguine on top for some more of the orange tone. So I really want that rounded shape on the chin. So there has to be enough shadow on the bottom half. This area needs so much more layers. And then I'm going to get a bit of brown, walnut brown this time. So that's, no, not that one. This one, walnut brown 177. A bit more neutral compared to the burnt umber. I'm going to make some hairs really dark. Let's darken up this stripe as well right away with the walnut brown. We're getting there for this part. Whoops. This part super long. I still need to do a little bit more dark in this stripe with the walnut brown, and then I'm going to do the chin hairs, and then this part should be finished. And then we need to do the rest, so quite a time-consuming piece, very detailed, really fun. Okay, so let's take some, let's do whites and add lighter hairs on the chin. The hairs start quite short. You don't have to make them very bright either. So the longer whiskers we're going to be doing later in part 3. For that we have to do the chest area first, and I'm actually planning on doing the chest with pastels because I feel that would look better. want a little bit more of that yellow tone, so I'm going to add a bit more of the warm gray too to the chin. And then going in between the hairs a little more with black for the final step of this part. Alright, so we are about there, a little bit more dark indigo. So now basically I can keep on glazing until I'm happy with the color combinations. Alright. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave this part for what it is. Let's zoom out a little bit, see what we have now. So this is where we're ending part 2, and then in part 3 we have to do all of the rest. I think I'll do the body area with pastel, so that will speed it up a little bit, and then we have to do the ears as well. So part 3 is also going to be a long one, but yep, let's end part 2 here, and I'll see you in the next part.